Wait, so that lemonade, have you seen it before?
I think there was a special offer. The last 2 packs of 10 cans
Yeah.
were $10.
Oh, wow.
So I guess like 20 cans for $10.
Oh, wow. Wait, no, that's normal-ish.
It's normal, but it was an offer. I guess it must be more expensive usually.
I guess. I can't tell. Well, it also looks like a nice brand. We're talking about soft drink beverages. We have this new Alta Palla sparkling lemonade.
120 calories for 12 ounces.
Yeah, less than a Coke, more than water, obviously.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like, how much do you normally pay for Diet Coke? Because I used to pay no more than 33 cents per can of Diet Coke.
Oh, I don't think I've ever gotten a pack of Coke myself.
Oh, you never bought it?
I've never bought like a pack myself. I usually get. I used to get a lot of it before, but my parents would get that, and I'd drink it in the house. But ever since starting college, I'd usually just get one of the like 500 or 600 milliliter cans.
Right.
And
or
bottles,
like
bottles,
or something.
I guess.
Yeah, but you could save like 75% if you.
But I only get it once a week, though.
Yeah, but that's fine. A 12-pack will last you 4 months.
It would, but the availability will make me drink it much quicker than in 4 months.
But like, okay, so for me, it becomes a toss-up. Like, do I have the willpower to only have 1 drink a week versus do I want to waste money?
That's true. Ideally, I would, buy the cheapest and then only drink it once a week. But practically, I don't know if that works out.
So what I do, because my new thing is bubbly water. I try not to drink Coke as much. Like, so there's bubbly, there's La Croix, there's like Perrier, of course, there's like San Pellegrino, whatever. All of those like carbonated waters, some of them with flavoring. Those are amazing. But I don't want to drink a ton. I want to like savor it. It's like a treat to me. I make it like a dessert, Like you have like maybe 1 or 2 a day. Like two
is
a
it
day
bad to drink a lot? Or?
No. I mean, some people say it's bad for your teeth because there's a lot of acidity. I mean, not that high of acidity. I think it's like a pH of like 6.
Oh, okay.
So like very lightly acidic. It's not like drinking lemon juice. Or like I'm sure that's more acidic because that's lemonade.
Yeah, probably like 4 maybe.
Yeah, but still that's nothing. If you have like a salad dressing vinaigrette that has lemon in it, then that could be like 4 or 3.
Yep.
But like just to savor it and just to like whatever practice self-control, mindfulness, I only drink them when they're cold, first of all. So that's my restriction. So I only put 1 in the fridge if I want one later that day. So it's like kind of like it's like a 2-hit thing. It's like I got to put one in the fridge and then I can take it because I'm not going to drink them cold because they're gross.
Or warm.
Yeah, sorry. I'm not going to drink them warm. So it's kind of like a self-control thing. I don't know. It works for me.
And you like bubbly more than
soda?
Others?
Yeah. Well, no, bubbly is what they have here.
Yeah.
But like my lazy thing is that I'd rather pay $1 for bubbly than bring a 33-cent can of bubbly from home in my bag to drink it.
I guess, I don't know. I think it's a psychological thing, but anything you buy that's outside of home tastes better than whatever you bring from home.
Yeah,
that's the case for me. I don't know if it's...
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe if I buy the bubbly here for $1, it will taste better than the 33-cent one I bring from home.
Do you think the fridges are colder?
It probably has to do with coldness, but like I don't know. I feel like even if I bring it and put it in the fridge in the morning, and
it's still not as good.
Yeah, it's a psychological thing.
I think there's something about the process of going down to the Starbucks stand and like seeing all the options of bubbly, and they have like 12 varieties. Whereas at home, I'm obviously only going to buy like 1 or 2 varieties.
Yeah.
So you go home, you go down, like, and it's like a treat, right? You like suck it up, and then it's only $1, so it's still not that expensive. Yeah, there's got to be something about that.
I think from all the carbonated waters, my favorite is San Pellegrino.
Yeah, but it's expensive here.
It's pretty expensive. But then there's also the San Pellegrino lemon flavor. Mm-hmm. That one tastes better than the bubbly flavors.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah. Bubbly is made by Pepsi, I think. I think it's the same company as Pepsi.
Oh.
Which makes like Dr. Pepper and Mountain Dew, right? Mm-hmm. I'm pretty sure all these soda companies are just like 2 or 3 big... It's like a duopoly-ish situation where they all kind of are made by the same 2 or 3 companies.
I think there was a period in time in the early 1900s when Coke was given the option to buy Pepsi.
And they turned it down.
Yeah, have you heard about it?
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, they turned it down. They're like, no, these guys aren't even competitors. It's a joke. And now they're the 2 biggest rivals.
Yeah, that's like at one point, well, this is kind of similar, but at one point, Yahoo had an offer to be purchased by Google, I think, for like billions, and they turned it down thinking, no, we're the best search engine ever. And now obviously Yahoo is irrelevant in terms of search.
And almost in terms of mail, like Google also overtook them in Gmail.
I think so. What does Yahoo do well now? Is another question. I think they do fantasy sports for people that are into that, and I think they have some stock indexing. So I think they like Yahoo Finance is still relevant.
Oh,
so I think
there was
their strength.
They're
like a news aggregation website now. You go to Yahoo, it's still like the homepage for some people.
Yeah, Yahoo News. Yeah. At one point, Yahoo Answers was very, very popular. And I remember being very, very active in that.
Oh, you were? You answer questions?
You get like points to answer questions and even more points if your answer is chosen as best answer.
Oh, wow.
And that was a really nice community. They had different fields where you could ask questions, and if you answer in these fields, you get considered like an expert.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And you feel good about answering something and then your answer being chosen as best answer.
Yeah, that's cool. It's funny how we were all like into these weird niche like forums on the internet, but now they've all kind of aggregated into like Reddit. You know?
Exactly.
So like, okay, so what's replaced Yahoo Answers? Reddit or Quora or whatever? Quora.
Quora, yep.
Yeah. It kind of seems like that's, I don't know. That's like the go-to when you like ask a technical question on the internet. That's usually one of the, but then you have to sign in to see the answers for some of those, and it's kind of a pain in the ass.
Apparently, I don't know if you've probably heard about this, but the reason Jordan Peterson wrote 12 Rules for Life is because of Quora. Someone had asked the question about, give me all your rules that make you who you are and why you're successful. And so Jordan Peterson posted like 35 or 40 rules. And his answer had 10,000 upvotes or whatever it's called on Quora.
So he was active on Quora.
Yeah, he was very active. And because of how successful that answer was, he decided to narrow it down to the 12.
And made a book of it.
And made a book about it.
Because he was going to write a sequel to that, right? Was it the next 12 or something like that?
Oh, I had no idea about that.
I thought he was going to write the next one, like More Rules or something like that. I can't remember what he had it called. I'm probably not going to read it. I struggled to get through 12 Rules for Life. I felt like toward the end, some of it was like kind of circle jerky.
Yeah,
it's kind of him,
a
like,
lot of it was repetitive.
Yeah, repetitive, but also, I don't want to say like arrogant or like, so it was a little preachy at the end maybe. I do less, I don't like Jordan Peterson. He has a good message and he has a good purpose. He's like trying to help people that are in difficult parts of their life, but I think he relies a lot on storytelling and allegories and stuff like that. And I think that's, it's not my preferred way of communication. I don't think I do well. That's why I don't take the biblical stories too strongly, because it doesn't do much for me. He like relies a lot on those or mythological stories and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know. I really liked his because you could get more didactic. You could be like, just do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that.
Yeah.
But I feel like the story with a moral, at least for me, seems much more of an efficient way of communicating than.
Yeah. So I agree with the moral part. I don't think that's my issue. But in terms of communicating some moral situation, I'd rather have it described in the language of like physics, for instance, where it's like a balance or a trade-off between two forces, rather than him turning back to some mythological story about a brother who does this and a brother who does this. And then he always goes back to some
archetypal.
Archetypal something. And that to me is, I think I have a harder time understanding that than I would like a balance of an equation or something like that.
I see.
So I think I'm more technically minded as opposed to like literarily minded, if that makes any sense.
Do you think that's something that applies to most people, or do you think that's mainly applicable to you? Like, do you think most people would prefer?
No, that's definitely unique to me. And because I'm like an engineer, right? I'm much better at math than I am at reading. True. Yeah. If you look at like my SAT or ACT or whatever, my MCAT scores, my math, science were always much better than reading.
Yeah.
And I consider writing, some people say it's like kind of in between those two, like math and reading. I consider writing to be more of a technical skill. Like I'm really good at grammar, but I'm really bad at getting the message of a passage if you give me a passage.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of my weaknesses. And that's why Jordan Peterson to me, on top of the other criticisms of him or whatever, he doesn't appeal to me super well. But he's an excellent speaker, obviously. He's very
Yeah, I got his book Maps of Meaning or Maps.
That's his older one.
Maps of Meaning.
I heard that one's a drag.
His older one. I didn't even start it.
Yeah,
I got it because it was on sale for like $20, and it's usually $65 or something like that.
It's a longer one, I presume.
It's much longer. Yeah, it's.
Oh my god.
It's like a textbook almost.
The way he talks about that is that's like the accumulation of all his work before 12 Rules for Life. So it's like, I imagine it's pretty comprehensive. You think you'll get through it eventually?
Maybe. I have like 20 books that I have to read. I mean, and a lot of them are books that he references that he himself acknowledges to be
like all those Russian things.
Of great value. You know, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy.
Goddamn. Wait, are those are translated, I presume?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think they're good?
Dostoevsky?
Yeah.
Dostoevsky is like the greatest writer in history.
But do you think like you would enjoy it?
Oh, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So I've read his two most famous books, The Brothers Karamazov and Crime and Punishment.
Okay, yeah.
Have you read them?
Crime and Punishment excerpts, but that's it, and I don't remember it.
Yeah. I mean, the great thing about Dostoevsky is he presents people in the worst time of their lives.
Uh-huh.
And after they've made some really bad decisions, and he shows that even after all that bad stuff that happens, there's chance for redemption.
Okay, huh.
And that parallels his life story a lot, because he, for a very long time, was active with the socialists. And this was before the Bolshevik Revolution. He was caught and he was sentenced to death by the Tsar.
Okay.
And then at the last minute, the Tsar sent someone to pardon him. So he was being taken to the place where he was going to get shot.
Right.
And
5 minutes before his death, he was saved.
When he was standing with people pointing their rifles at him, someone comes running and says, the Tsar has pardoned them, don't execute them. And after that moment, I think that's when he became an Orthodox Christian. Huh. He was an atheist before.
Why? So he attributed this saving from God, maybe?
He said that in his last few moments, he felt like he looked at the sun and he saw how beautiful it was. Yeah. And he wished to have just one more hour of life. And that he really started appreciating life. And he said, at that moment you feel you have such a love for life and for people and for just the smallest things that you don't notice on a day-to-day basis, that you feel like an idiot.
Right, yeah.
Who just loves everything. And that was the basis for his book called The Idiot.
Huh. I like the message. I like the end goal.
I think you would really enjoy Russian literature. You should.
I struggle to get through stuff like that. You think I'd get through it?
It's very different from everything else, so I think there's a chance that it might be so different that you would like it.
Maybe it's worth a shot. How long are they?
I mean, they're Russian novels, and they're known for their length.
Oh, really?
It's like, I think Crime and Punishment was 600 pages.
Okay. How do they read? Pretty coherently, or do they go off on tangents, or is it like well organized and well structured?
Plot-wise, very well structured.
So it's written like a story.
Oh yeah, it's a story. It's
okay. Huh.
Crime and Punishment is about, and this is the beautiful thing about Dostoevsky is you can know the whole story and you would still enjoy it. It's not like about spoilers. It's about, he was more of a psychologist, and Nietzsche called him the greatest psychologist that he's ever read.
Huh.
The beautiful thing about reading Dostoevsky is seeing what's going on in the minds of his characters. So Crime and Punishment, like, you probably know, it's about a guy who killed his landlord and spends the rest of the novel trying to hide from the police and like just going through all the thought processes and why he was justified in doing it and why he's greater than other people. And
right.
Yeah.
Huh. Maybe I'll
what do you usually read?
Usually like these like philosophy, psychology books.
So not novels?
So recently I started reading novels again. I read 1984 and Brave New World back in high school or whatever, maybe senior year of high school. I'm reading them again now just because I feel like I've grown a lot since then and might appreciate them more since then. And like the implications that the West is kind of like Brave New World, where we seek pleasure, whereas the communist socialist countries might be more like 1984. I mean, obviously there are exaggerations, but it's nice to read it now in the context of like today's world and I guess the political spectrum as I see it now, as opposed to when I saw it 10 years ago or whatever. So I'm going through those. I just finished 1984. I'm reading this other book. It's kind of like a biography of Marie Curie. You know who that is?
Yep.
One of the strongest female scientists, like inspiration to like feminists in science all the time. It's kind of her life story and where she came from, and it's decent. I can send you it if you want.
Yeah,
I have the book.
Absolutely. What's it called?
Here, let me check real quick. I think it's something about her life. But it started off pretty slow, but it's picking up. It's okay now. My girlfriend recommended it to me, actually, and I was surprised that I actually liked it. What did she discover? Radium, I think?
Yeah, I think she pioneered the field of radioactivity.
Right, and this was like 1800s. It's called The Inner World of Marie Curie. I'll send it to you when I'm done with it. I'll be done soon. But
yep,
it's pretty good. But that's relatively slow for me. Like historical whatever books like that. I don't know if I'd get through like Crime and Punishment if it's that long. But I mean, I might as well try. Sometimes I like start books and then I give up. But before that, I read a bunch of books that were like nonfiction for sure. Like there was a book called Factfulness that talked about how our view of the world is like overly pessimistic and how a lot of the trends in the world are getting a lot better. Objective, like straight to the point, facts, stuff like that.
Because most of what we see seems to portray everything is going just downhill and everything is just turning to ashes.
Right.
Or in fact, that's not the case in most cases.
Right. Like in most cases, the poverty rate everywhere has decreased, and we've redefined poverty to include a bigger group of people. And the infant mortality rate has decreased significantly in almost all countries, and people have more rights in more places, and everything's getting better. But for some reason, there's like an incentive in the media, there's an incentive when we talk to other people to make things look bad. And I don't want to call it fear-mongering, but to some degree, I think some people are driven to action when they think things are not going well.
Yep.
So it's like poking a donkey from the back instead of holding a carrot in front of its head. How do you want to motivate people? And I think that leads us to think that the birth rates and death rates have stagnated or gotten worse since the 60s, when it's clearly the opposite, and the world is a much better place today than it's ever been, on average.
Yeah, I remember listening to Steven Pinker. Okay. Have you heard of him?
Sounds familiar, but I don't know.
He's a very famous psychologist. I think at either Harvard or Stanford, one of the two. And he was talking about how things like wars are much less deadly today than they were. I guess not per capita, but just in terms of total number of deaths from wars and famine and everything is much less today than it's ever been at any other point in time in history. And he got in a lot of trouble for that somehow.
But that's true.
It's true, and he still got in trouble for it.
Yeah, the evolution, that's an interesting like kind of progression through time, the evolution of war. Because during like medieval Europe or whatever, it used to be almost a game. It used to be like the royalty would go to war and it'd be like, oh, I lost a battle here, I won a battle here, but they didn't think much of it. And the people who died would be like in the dozens, maybe hundreds. And it would be like the peasant, the poor people. So they wouldn't matter as much if they died. And they would almost see it as like playing chess, but with real people. Then like World War II happened. World War I obviously happened first, and that was more gruesome. We introduced like chemical warfare, and there was mustard gas everywhere. And it seems like that's when it's most gruesome, World War I and II. And then we dropped the atomic bombs, and since then, wars have not been to kill or invade. They've been to, invade, but in a different way, right? Invade in quotes. And yeah, it's definitely less violent than it was in World War II. So it seems like wars got worse in the like 20s, 30s, 40s, and then since then have kind of declined.
Once we saw just how bad it could get.
Once we saw the like true strength of the atomic bomb, which to me is a good thing.
I guess I don't know if in retrospect it might even justify the thought of like the war to end all wars, the bomb that would end all bombs.
Yeah, like obviously we haven't dropped one since, and everybody else is hesitant.
Not not in an aggressive manner.
Right, not to kill. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe I guess that does justify it to some degree. If you ask Japanese people, they would obviously disagree, and they'd be like, clearly this was not a good idea. If the U.S. didn't drop it, then maybe the Germans would have gotten to it, maybe the Russians would have gotten to it, and maybe they would have tried it first. And the outcome might have been the same anyway, right? Like, imagine if during the Cold War, Cuban Missile Crisis, something happened, they bombed a city in the U.S. Maybe that also would have been a wake-up call and been like, no, let's never do this again. So the counterpoint to the war thing would be that today we have drone warfare. And that leads you to kill people in an impersonal way. So it allows you to, put on a VR headset, grab an Xbox controller, and kill someone from 2,000 miles away. That's a new development in war that's relatively recent. That wasn't present in Vietnam or whatever.
That's true, but it's at least from what I know, it's being used in an incredibly targeted manner.
Yeah.
Which doesn't exclude collateral damage.
Right, yeah.
And innocent deaths. But nowhere near, just the gruesome mass action war of 100 years ago.
Yeah, or even 80 years ago, right? We used to firebomb Japan. We used to run these planes over Tokyo and drop firebombs over the entire thing. Like when the Germans were invading France and London, they would just bomb London.
Mm-hmm.
Like that doesn't we don't bomb cities like that anymore. Like, okay, so Iraq was a mistake in my eyes, U.S. invasion of Iraq, but that still wasn't like bombing entire settlements, right? It was like sending ground troops in, going door to door.
Yeah, I think I was looking at the total deaths of the Iraq War.
Tens of thousands?
I thought it was 500,000 Iraqis.
Oh.
Yeah, we have to check that.
Yeah, okay.
Because if it is 500,000, there definitely weren't 500,000 in the army.
No. I think the number I might be citing might be U.S. soldiers.
So U.S. soldiers, I think it was 2,000?
Yeah. Wait, that's it? No, I thought it was more than 9/11. I'm pretty sure that was tens of thousands. 4,424.
U.S. soldiers or Iraqis?
This is including total deaths. This is Department of Defense as of 2016. Both killed in action and non-hostile. And 31,900 were wounded in action as a result of the Iraq War. So tens of thousands I'm talking about? Oh, so this is... Okay, so different surveys tell you different things.
So on Wikipedia it says U.S. total dead 25,000. Okay. And Iraqi total dead 34 to 37,000.
Okay, so tens of thousands.
Yeah. So I guess...
Thank God it's not 500,000.
Yeah. I don't know where I got that.
I thought I saw that there was some Iraqi publication that said it was something like 200,000, but that might have been.
Yeah.
It's interesting how wildly the numbers in this vary based on the reporting source.
But even if 500,000 didn't die, millions more had to relocate, and then the subsequent rise of ISIS.
Right. So this isn't counting the Syrian war, which you might say is a result of the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
Yeah, and all of this that resulted from ISIS.
Yeah.
As well.
Agreed. No, agreed. And all the the Yazidi women that resulted from ISIS. Yeah. All the atrocities that resulted from ISIS.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it would be an understatement to say, just 40,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're right.
But at the same time, if a war to the same scale would have happened 200 years ago, these people might have not even had the opportunity to relocate. It would have just been famine and death for most of them.
Right. Or if this was like a World War II level invasion, then clearly there would have been less mercy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how war has changed, but obviously that's not meant to excuse it.
It seems to have become much less personal, I guess I have this maybe romantic notion of war in old times as being more honorable, maybe.
Maybe.
Which might not be true, but the one example I could think of is the Christmas truce of 1914.
Which was?
So at the beginning of the First World War, I think it started in June of 1914, and most people thought that it will be done within 3 or 4 months. Then by December, Christmas came, and in the First World War it was all about trenches,
right? Yeah.
And trenches would literally be a stone's throw away from each other. So Christmas came. The British troops started singing on Christmas Eve Christmas carols, and the German troops could hear them.
Right.
And so and it's the same tune, but just in different languages.
Right. Yeah.
And so the Germans started singing their own Christmas carols, and the British joined them, and they started singing with each other from their own trenches. And then the following day, on Christmas Day, apparently they agreed to a truce that spanned most of the Western Front, most of the lines on the Western Front. And there are pictures of them playing football with each other and just exchanging addresses and things for after the war. And that was just a beautiful thing,
I think that's a unique example that's more honorable than the others. But yeah,
that's true. Yeah.
No, I like that. That's cute.
But it would be hard to imagine something like that happening today. Like, with all these specialized forces and the fact that combat is, you don't have that close of a combat anymore.
Right.
You go and the guns do most of the killing and most people are already dead.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like
that's much less humanizing.
Whose tank can fire the farthest?
Exactly.
And if it fires from like hundreds of feet away, then you're not even going to see the people that you're blasting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's such a difference. I think another element to that is what makes it seem honorable or what makes it seem better than what we see in wars today is like looking at it through the lens of history. I think presenting a war as it's occurring today in Syria is going to be gruesome no matter how you look at it. Whereas looking through the lens of the past, you can kind of like build the story more and maybe see it in a different light.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not saying maybe in 500 years, I don't think U.S. invasion around the world is going to look good. But it might look better than it looks today. Or maybe the historians...
Do you think it's not going to look good? I mean, do we look at Roman conquests in a bad light? Or do we see them as heroes who spread civilization to the barbaric...
It depends on who you ask. If you ask like a minority group, they're not going to say the Romans were heroes. Right? Like, it's like an insult when an African person calls a white person a colonizer. You know what I mean? Like, there's a big group in academia that sees what the white people did throughout history as like atrocious. There's all these like British apologists ashamed of being British, and there's like a what do they call it, decolonizing history classes, where instead of teaching the white man's history, they teach the African history or the Asian history, and how like from their perspective and how it went from their perspective, kind of painting maybe the British and the French and the Americans eventually in a worse light. So I think the mainstream history paints white people as like very just the main characters, the protagonist of the story. Whereas if you look at it from any other perspective, we don't look as great. We being Americans, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like history written by the winners, right? But does that mean that like the Iraq War was justified because America has bigger guns?
Yeah, it seems like recent history is very different from ancient history. Which
is that the lens of looking at it through the past, or lens of it being more
looking
recent?
at it through the winner's eyes?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if but that's a different thing though about I guess modern society versus ancient society. I haven't lived in Rome 2,000 years ago, but I would still feel like the average Roman citizen would be very proud of his emperor going and conquering these barbaric German tribes, whereas the modern American would look at it very
sometimes with shame, right?
With extreme shame, which I feel is a very recent phenomenon.
Yeah.
Like even in the 19th, in the British conquests of the 18th and 19th centuries.
Right.
I would have felt like most British people were very proud of what their country was doing. Some of them, opposed certain aspects of what the system of their country had, like slavery.
Right.
Like there were some very famous abolitionists for as long as slavery was part of the British Empire. But I feel like even they would acknowledge that their empire spread some good things to the places that they conquered. Whereas I don't think we see that to anywhere near the same extent in modern times.
In the U.S.
In the U.S. and even in most of Europe.
At least not in our circles. At least not in academic circles.
That's true, yeah.
I bet if we joined the military, we would feel we're going to go kill some terrorists. We're going to go, like the pride, fuck yeah, we're America, we're the strongest, we're the camaraderie, the brotherhood of the military. I wonder if it's where we work, maybe, we're not exposed to those people as much. Because you almost need that attitude, you almost need that pride in the military.
Oh, definitely.
And I don't know, you watch like an American football game and they do the national anthem before. Mm-hmm. That's a thing, the solemn, Pledge of Allegiance.
Yeah, you need that in a country that's made up of such a heterogeneous group of people.
Yeah, you need some unifying factor.
The flag, yeah, like the American devotion to the flag is something that
it's pretty unique.
Extremely unique, yeah. Like in other countries, people respect their flag, and you might see it on state buildings and stuff. But you don't see it on every other house.
You don't see it at Walmart. No, I agree. I think France does that too to some degree. I saw a lot of French flags all over France. When I was in UK, I kind of noticed that there's never any flags unless it's Capitol buildings in London. And some people see it as like a symbol of oppression, as a symbol of colonizing. And the English flag, the white with the red bars, that's almost like a symbol of racism. That's almost like the Confederate flag there.
Oh, wow.
That's like the people who say England first, like England over Scotland, England over Wales, England first. That's very out in the country, like there's a symbol, it's kind of almost white trash-ish of a symbol out there. It's weird. Whereas in the US, like you see flags, you don't even think about it.
Yeah, and it was when I was in Germany, I noticed the same thing. I was there in the summer of 2016, which was when the Euros were going on.
Right.
I saw more Turkish flags in Germany than I saw German flags.
Crazy.
There were barely any German. Yeah. And they also have, I guess a special history.
Yeah, so they're not allowed to. That's the thing.
Yeah. So for them, any display of nationalism brings back to them memories of the 1930s and 40s.
And they're almost indoctrinated to not have nationalism.
Yeah.
In schools, right? They're taught to be very apologetic about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that's one of the big differences when people compare the US and the EU, and they talk about the EU having an army where everybody works together. The problem with the EU is that there's no unifying anything between the countries, right? In the US, we have a common language. There's different, kind of dialects in the language, but everybody identifies as American with our flag everywhere. The EU as a unifying body doesn't have as much.
Yeah, there's a concept of Europeanism, but I feel like there's a backlash against that in modern times in most of these countries. As we're not the heroes, we're the bad Europeans, and we've done so much bad in history.
But like even what is the culture of Europe? How do you can describe the culture of France, of Italy, of Spain, of Hungary, of whatever, Romania, but how do you describe the culture of Europe as a whole?
Yeah, and that's probably one of the biggest arguments that was used for Brexit.
Right.
Is what unites us with these people? Why should we let these people across the continent, across the channel, dictate to us what we could do back home when there really isn't that much that connects us?
Right.
And a long time ago, it used to be Christianity.
Was the unifying factor.
Christianity was known as Christendom, the land of Christianity. And today, obviously, that's much less of a unifying factor.
I think I'm okay with that. Didn't we talk about last time the dangers of unifying over a religion, or legislating based on a religion, or a governing body having a religious identification?
I think we talked about it in the light of
Islam,
yeah. Yep.
What would make it okay or better than that for Christianity?
I think the basic tenets of the religion, of the person who founded the religion, of the way that the religion spread, that if you just look at the basic tenets of Islam, you would automatically say, I don't agree with that. If you look at the basic tenets of, and as an example, that it's okay to marry a 9-year-old, I'm sure you would oppose that.
Yeah, but that's not like I can point to the Old Testament and say it's okay to stone someone to death who has clothes of different fabrics stitched together.
Yeah, but we're not Jews, though. That's the thing, that we believe that Jesus came and he completed the Old Testament, made it more perfect.
So why is it still in our book?
It's important to know, the progression of mankind's relationship with God. Because, and in the Old Testament, you had the 10 Commandments. Do not kill, do not commit adultery.
Yeah.
And then Jesus comes and doesn't say don't kill. He says don't even harbor anger against someone. He doesn't say don't commit adultery. He says don't even think wrongly about a woman.
Right.
And so if you think about Middle Eastern culture in 1500 BC, if someone would come and tell you that when someone smacks you on the cheek, turn the other cheek to him.
Yeah.
And you're just this savage from 1500 BC.
Right.
You're gonna look at that person and you're gonna slap him.
Yeah, you're gonna laugh at them. Yeah.
But if someone comes and just tells you, okay, first of all, just don't kill anyone.
Right.
That's how God approached mankind. Like first as a child who was developing, and then giving him after having had the Old Testament for several centuries, only then was he prepared to receive the fullness of the New Testament in the form of Jesus Christ.
So you're saying God kind of gives you more mature instructions as our societies have matured.
Yeah.
in a way. Okay, I like that actually.
My problem with Islam is it claims to come after Christianity to be the full perfection of religion, and yet in most ways going back to things that are not even present in the Old Testament, things that are even worse than what we might find today to be not good with the Old Testament.
But like what you said about not stoning a gay person, or not stoning a prostitute, or not stoning somebody who wears different, or who works on the Sabbath or whatever, wouldn't a Muslim person say that about whatever arbitrary law we pick from the Quran that we don't like? Like marrying a 9-year-old? Can't like if we had a Muslim person here that could defend Islam properly, could they not just give the same response you gave about the things in our book that we don't like for their book?
No, they cannot, because for them their book is the literal word of God. It is the final word of God.
But there are groups of Christianity that believe that about the Bible too, right?
About the New Testament, yeah. But we're saying that the New Testament took the Old Testament and made it so much fuller.
Yeah.
Whereas what I'm saying is, the Quran, I guess, took the New Testament and made it so much worse.
It's yeah. I think.
And so like if you find me something from the New Testament which you disagree with, it would be really hard to do. I mean, most of it is about loving the enemy, about not thinking of oneself. Which if you disagree with that on, that's fine. We could talk about it. But I think it's much. Anyone would recognize it as being much more.
I mean, it's more modern.
Much more modern than something that tells you go fight people wherever they. If you find someone who doesn't claim that Allah is the only God, then go and fight him.
Yeah. No, okay, agreed. If we're comparing the Quran to the New Testament, I would probably align with the New Testament more from what I've read from the Quran. But I don't know. I also feel like us selecting the book of Christianity to be just the New Testament is also a little. It's like a technicality. Especially because the majority of Muslims aren't marrying 9-year-olds. Like in my eyes, we take, like, every religion takes their scripture with a grain of salt and kind of picks and chooses what they want to believe. And I would agree that picking and choosing the better things obviously is better than taking the entire thing as a whole. What's wrong with a Muslim who picks and chooses from the Quran, and maybe their scripture says that it's the literal word of God, but they don't actually believe that?
Yeah, I mean, so one thing which we also brought up last time is we have to separate the actions of individual humans from the teachings of the religion.
Yeah.
Most Muslims are wonderful people. Most of my friends, most of my best friends are Muslims, and thank God they don't follow the Quran as rigorously as they should.
Right. But they might also say, thank God you don't follow the Old Testament as rigorously as you should, or you'd be stoning gay people here.
Yeah, but the thing is, if I was Jewish, then that's true.
Okay.
All I have is the Old Testament, and that's what I should follow.
Right.
And I don't know anything better. But as a Christian, I have the New Testament, which has, in very specific ways, shown us a better point of view. That I don't want to say it repeals the Old Testament, but it fulfills it, it completes it. And so it's not that I'm. Like, in the Old Testament, I guess it was almost like an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
But the New Testament comes and clearly says if someone beats me, I should give him the other cheek.
It's loving God versus vengeful God. Yeah, agreed. Versus angry God.
And so it's not that in this case, I choose what to follow that's in the New Testament, whereas in other cases, I choose what to follow that's in the Old Testament.
Right.
It's that in all cases, the New Testament has shown us a better way to approach life. And so I don't think it would be logically inconsistent to follow the New Testament in all cases in its rulings versus the Old Testament.
So why do we still print the Old Testament? Why do we still read scripture from the Old Testament? Why do we still?
It's very edifying. I mean, it's not that it was overturned, overruled, and like that we could throw it away. It's something that helps us really understand the progression of man's relationship with God.
Could a Muslim person say the same thing about the parts of the Quran that we don't like?
He could, but he would have to start a new religion, because Islam is very explicit about the Quran being the final word of God. That's unalterable, that's fully correct.
I don't, yeah. I think we're never going to agree on this because we never have. But I don't see religion as this like rigid of a structure You know, like I don't really see the reason to create a new religion when most people don't take their religious book as seriously as it's written anyway. You know, it's like most Muslims don't follow the Quran perfectly anyway, so like, what does it matter? Most Christians don't follow the Bible, then even the New Testament as strictly.
And I would say it's unfortunate that most Christians don't follow the Bible. Yeah. But it's really fortunate that most Muslims don't follow the Quran. Literally.
I would say that it's pretty fortunate that most Christians don't follow the Bible as well. Because there's a lot of conflicting things within the Bible, and there's a lot of things that wouldn't be okay in our society within the Bible.
Like what?
The examples I gave you earlier, the same stuff.
But these were from the Old Testament.
Okay, I don't know any examples from the New
Testament. Which, like for about stoning people, Jesus came and he said that when people were stoning the adulteress, I think, he said, let he who is without sin stone be the first to throw the stone. Yeah. So that's a very clear way of showing a more godly way of approaching this. Yeah. Whereas in the Quran, it's very explicit that if someone commits adultery, they have to be stoned. Oh, another interesting thing, it says in the Quran that if someone has committed adultery, you need either 2 men as witnesses or 1 man and 2 women.
Oh, so it's just
which means the witness of 1 woman is equal to half of that of a man. Yeah. Which is something absurd that.
When was this thing written?
The Quran.
Like 900 years ago or something like
that? In the 7th century, so around 600 AD.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, 1400 years ago.
I feel like it's like criticizing books that are over 1,000 years old. It's like,
but the thing is that
it's a crapshoot.
The thing is that the Gospels were written 600 years before that.
Yeah.
And they seem to be more progressive by today's standards.
Okay, that's fine, but there are also parts of the Quran that aren't terrible. And it's not like people practice this, People in the West don't practice Islam by the Quran like this, not this strictly.
Yeah. I mean,
like I find it difficult to dismiss an entire religion because of parts of the book that you don't like, when parts of your religion has a book that you also don't like, or that you're saying has been superseded, or that you're saying has been
become more complete.
What if they said that like Muslim teachings have also become more complete in the past 1,300 years since it's been written? And I'm sure that's how they would defend it.
No, that's not. No Muslim would ever say that.
You don't think a Muslim person in the U.S. would say that those things are archaic? We don't actually believe in caliphate or whatever.
Well, I think they would say that.
4 wives.
Yeah,
they would say that.
But that's where we differ about how we look at religion. Is for you religion? I guess you look at it very practically in terms of how will it affect me, which means how does the adherent of the religion carry himself? How does he behave? Right. To what extent does he follow the teachings of the religion? Yeah. For me, I look at it taking away all human inputs and looking only at the basic tenets of the religion.
Why look at it that way when that's not the way it's practiced?
Because if you're looking for truth, then you shouldn't care what people do. You should look for the religion as it's intended to be practiced. Okay. Which definitely wouldn't matter if you just want to know how it's going to affect you, like how will this religion result in a terrorist, or will it result in? And most Muslims aren't terrorists, but at the same time, most terrorists are Muslims.
Yeah, but that's like going back to the Crusade era and saying most violent wars are fought by Christians.
Were they?
During the Crusade years? I don't know. I'm guessing.
I feel like I've seen I saw one of these graphics of like a map over time that shows dots of where battles occurred, and most religious battles in history were fought by Muslims.
No. Okay, not throughout all of history. Say we went back to the year of 1100. Yeah, and we said most wars this year were fought by Christians.
Yeah, but I mean, like if you want to look at a specific day within a specific year and say, this battle was...
I'm not saying a specific day. I'm saying take a 100-year range. During the Crusades, you could say most of the wars, most of the deaths were caused by Christians. Whereas if we look at the past 100 years, you're saying most of the terrorists over the past 100 years are Muslims. That's true, but it's like what's the point? Like, Christians have done shitty things in the past, and there are a lot of elements of Christianity that you don't like. All of Catholicism you don't like. I'm sure there are Muslims today that would defend Islam by saying there are a lot of parts of Islam that we don't like, and obviously the terrorists and the jihad groups and all that are all that. Mm-hmm. What is actually intrinsically different about Islam? I like your point about how the text is, maybe their text is incomplete.
It's like theory versus practice, right?
Mm-hmm. You think Christianity is better in theory?
Absolutely.
But maybe they're equivalent in practice. Because I would argue 100% they're equivalent in practice, and there's no difference in practice. In theory,
you think there's no difference between a man getting to marry 4 women and...
No, but that's not what actually happens. Most Muslims don't marry 4 women.
Is that true?
France,
not
France is 20%
like,
Muslim now?
Yeah.
There's a lot of Muslims in France. Do they have 4 wives?
The law doesn't allow them to marry more than 1.
Maybe it's a good thing that we don't have the law influenced by religion then. So practically, it doesn't matter.
Maybe in the West, but like if you look at a Middle Eastern country, do most men have fewer than 2 wives? Where the law
Majority probably yes, but I don't know. It's the rates. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the numbers.
You know, I had a lot of friends whose dads had multiple wives. I don't think it was most of them, but
yeah.
But it was definitely more than 20%.
I sent you that BBC documentary podcast.
You did,
on pleasure marriages.
And one of my friends' dads would, I think, you know, over my 7 or 8 years there, his dad had 1 main wife.
Yeah.
And then 1 wife that changed every 2 or 3 years.
And it was okayed by the religious head in the area.
Yeah. I mean, in Islam, you're free to marry and divorce as many times as you want, as long as you don't have more than 4 at a time.
Yeah, that's pretty fucked. It seemed from that podcast. This is a BBC documentary podcast. I think it came out last week.
But this one is specifically about them being sold and yeah.
And it was approved by the religious head. I don't know what they call him there, but it was almost like state-sponsored, religious-sponsored prostitution. And a lot of times it wouldn't be consensual. It would be rape. And the woman would be traumatized afterwards. It's really fucked up. I don't know.
Yeah, you look at their prophet. He had 13 known wives and many more concubines.
And many of them very young, I know.
Oh, yeah. Most of them against their will. In
some ways, I see Islam as a younger religion than Christianity. Obviously, it is
a more savage religion.
Just like Christianity was more savage in the past, is what I mean.
Well, Christianity or Christians?
Both.
How is Christianity more savage in the past?
Look at Christianity during the Crusades. That's the best example. Look at what the Christians did to the science industry when Galileo was...
That's people, though. Has the religion of Christianity changed?
Judaism has. And we believe that we're a direct follow of Judaism.
Yeah, and that we have fulfilled Judaism. We've made it more complete.
So maybe in 500 years, the Muslims will write another text and say, we have made Islam more complete.
The text of the Quran specifically states this is the final revelation from God.
I can't argue the Muslim perspective that well, because I was raised Christian, and I know all the Christian documents. I would be surprised if somebody who could argue the Muslim text would not point to something else, a newer text or a revised version of their laws or ethics.
They don't revise anything. That's a dangerous thing about Islam. Is we were talking about how last time we were talking about how for them the past is the most glorious, versus in Western culture we look very positively towards the future. Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting difference.
And it stems from this. I guess it goes back to the idea that they've received this complete knowledge 1,400 years ago, that nothing can complete it, that it's perfect as it is. And that's if you listen to Richard Dawkins, he criticizes, all religions, but he takes a special stance against Islam. Yeah. Precisely because of that idea that nothing could be improved and how dangerous that idea is.
I agree. That's and it's closed-minded, obviously, in a sense, to shut yourself off from anything that could improve you. I agree. That's dangerous. And thank goodness that hasn't bled into practice of Islam in the West, at least.
Not yet, because they weren't given the opportunity. I mean, I think there's a group in Belgium that's a political party that just got recognition, whose main aim is to spread Sharia law in Belgium. And if that happens, then you could marry more than 1 wife. They're definitely not going to win or anything because most of Belgium is not Muslim, and think it's a ridiculous idea to like not let women go out in public without headscarves or things like that.
Yeah.
But I don't think that it's because Muslims are intrinsically different in the West. I think it's because the West is intrinsically different from the Middle East. Western laws just don't allow people to.
So maybe instead of sticking up for any kind of religion, I should just stick up for United States values to separate church from state.
I think that's pretty safe.
Yeah.
I mean, ideally you would stick up for Christianity.
But I see Christianity as committing similar atrocities.
You see Christians as committing similar atrocities. You don't see, like, even the Crusades.
Okay, that's fine.
Jesus said, love your enemies. When you go and you kill, the Muslims in Israel, in Palestine.
Right. But practically, Christians were murdering people.
Yeah.
Like, okay, it wasn't, like, God didn't instruct them to, but they did it. Like, it's almost a semantical difference to say criticizing Christians versus criticizing Christianity. Because I could respond to every criticism you have of Muslims by saying you're criticizing Islam, not Muslims. Like, maybe if you want to be a terrorist apologist, you could say, oh, maybe the people are just misunderstood and you can't blame them, just blame Islam. It's like, what's the difference? Practically, they're the same.
The difference is that we are, I guess from my point of view, we are looking for a religion that comes from, by definition, from God.
Okay.
Which is supposed to be perfect.
Okay.
Which, if followed perfectly, should result in a perfect society.
Right.
And I am saying that the teachings of Christianity lead to that, whereas the teachings of Islam lead to something that is completely different from what we would think of as a perfect society.
Okay, agreed. Based on what we've said, theoretically, I think Christianity is better. Practically throughout history, I don't know if Christians/Christianity have been better than Muslims/Islam.
Where has most progress come from, though?
Atheists. Secularists. Not with a Christian motive. Maybe in Christian-dominated
60% of Nobel Prize winners were Christians.
Okay, let's look at it proportionally. A Jewish person is 10,000 times more likely to get a Nobel Prize.
That's true.
So if we're going to talk about scientific progress, Jews are way more successful than anybody else. If we're going to talk about any kind of progress, Jews are way more successful than anybody else. So why aren't we talking about Judaism? Because it's a tiny fraction of society, and because there's been anti-Semitism throughout all of history. It's very, to me, theoretically, okay, Christianity might be better than Islam, but theoretically, no religion is better than religion. Or a defining set of...
Based on what? I mean, Stalin didn't have a religion. Soviet Russia didn't have a religion.
The United States doesn't have much of a religion.
But it's based on Christian values, though.
Loosely, not explicitly.
Whereas you're saying that no religion is better than a religion, therefore a society based on no religion like Soviet Russia or Mao's China should do better than a society loosely based on religion like America or, Christian influenced societies like the Western world.
Yeah, okay, I hear you. Maybe the solution is everything in moderation.
Even moderation.
It's like I'm a centrist on everything, so I have no opinions. Okay, I gotta pee, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine.
First PP break, podcast listeners. Okay, we're back now. That was our first PP break of the podcast. This is still the second episode. Okay. Yeah, last thing we said was, Mao Zedong and Stalin both also didn't have religion, and look what happened to their societies. Do you think that those societies failed because they didn't have religion?
I think when you don't have religion, it's hard to attach value to the individual.
How does America do it? Because America is arguably the most individualistic society.
They place a lot of value on the person, right? On the personhood of every man and woman.
But they don't do that with religion.
The concept of the God-given rights.
Yeah, we're definitely recording, right?
It's recording.
Okay, all right. Sorry. The concept of the God-given rights.
Of the God-given rights of freedom, or what is it?
Life,
happiness, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
Doesn't it say in the document we hold these truths to be self-evident?
Something, so help me God, whatever.
Yeah, and you can't hold any truth to be self-evident unless you have some sort of power that's grounding you. Because otherwise, truth would not be self-evident for everyone. It would be a relative truth.
Okay, so what is grounding us in the U.S. Constitution, or documents that say that.
I think the Constitution was definitely founded on Christian values.
Yeah, but it doesn't even like point to scripture. It doesn't.
But it acknowledges the existence of a God, which itself,
Okay, it says God. It references the word God, and it uses a capital G. But it doesn't say which God. It like if you.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at the founders, I think 90 or 95% of them were Christians.
I mean, just like 85% of Americans today are Christians. How many do you think are actually Christians? This is what the statistics say, right? Like, yes, historically Thomas Jefferson was Christian. Does that mean he like devoutly believed in God? And like, it's impossible to know what was in their heads when they were writing these documents at the time, obviously. But
it is. But I feel like when we practice something versus when we articulate it are two different things. And when we're articulating something or putting it into writing, like for example writing a constitution, then our inherent values are much more purely represented than our day-to-day lives.
Okay. So you think their inherent values might have come from religion?
Yeah.
But they were able to communicate those values, put them on paper in a constitution without referring to religion any more so than saying God. Like, they didn't point to scriptures.
But I mean, what do you need to have something grounded in religion? God is all you need, right?
Well, okay, so Sharia law would be the opposite extreme, where like every law you can point to where the Quran, it's written kind of commanded by God. But
yeah.
It seems like the very loose reference to God that's on our money, that's on our bills, that's on our whatever, that's in our constitution, that's in the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever. God could be anything. God could be Zeus. God could be the Buddhist Brahman, they call it. The spirit. God could be the idea of reincarnation. God could be like it's such a loose definition to just say God.
But okay, but it would still be a God and because you were asking about how non-religion would be better than religion. And so in the case of America, where you have some God to base your ideals on,
right?
Then going back to the question of how is that better than, like, how could it be that America is better than Russia and Soviet Russia and
Mao Zedong's reign, yeah.
and communist China? I think it goes back to that they had something to base their beliefs on. To me, it seems evident that they mostly agreed on Judeo-Christian values, and that allowed for the success of their society. I think it would have been much more difficult if, at the time, most of America was atheist or of a different religion and didn't agree with these basic principles. Like if America started out as a very heterogeneous society, then it would have been very difficult to get itself to the point, I think in the early 1900s or mid-1900s when it started taking in all these immigrants from very different backgrounds,
right.
By which point in time its values were so ingrained that you could almost separate them from God and link them only to them being American values.
Yeah.
And at that point in time, it's like its foundation became more solid.
Right.
That external influences that people naturally bring with them from their own societies,
right,
don't really shake it too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe the concept of God and the idea of religion was necessary for the founding of America.
But they're not necessary anymore.
I mean, it's still in our documents. We haven't changed the Pledge of Allegiance. Or some people have tried, whatever. I don't know. I also think that you can kind of take this idea of God and it could be anything. Like your God could be science. Or you can have faith in the scientific method, or you can have faith in the Constitution. You can have faith in the Supreme Court of the U.S., or you can have faith in the power of a jury, or
Yeah.
You can have faith in the Bill of Rights. This idea of God doesn't necessarily need to be what we're thinking of when we say God. It doesn't need to be Allah. It doesn't need to be Christian God. It doesn't need to be Jewish God. It doesn't need to be a Zeus. Do
you think that everyone has his own God?
Yeah, even if they don't like to admit it. Richard Dawkins' God is logic, reason, whatever bullshit he wants to call it.
Yep.
Same with Sam Harris. All these like horsemen of atheism, their God is just logic, reasoning.
Just as for Stalin, his God was the Communist Party or communism.
Yeah. Or maybe the idea of socialism. The collective.
Yeah.
Agreed. It's not a figurehead. It's not someone you pray to. It's not a communicative God, but it's an idea. And I might agree that if we're going to use that loose definition of God, everybody needs a God. Like, okay, so what if you have none of those, but you're fully committed to your family and your kids?
that your family and your kids are your God.
That's kind of cute in a way. But like, I guess we're just broadening the definition of God to mean purpose. And by that definition, then I would say, yes, everybody needs a purpose. Everybody needs something to believe in.
Yeah, and to that I would say, when you have that many definitions of God, would you agree that some of these would be more beneficial than others, or would you say that they're all equal?
I think it depends on the person. Like, obviously, Christianity for me is not beneficial. But for me, my friends and my family and the things I enjoy, my hobbies, are beneficial.
But, so I think if we take out the person from the equation,
okay,
if you just look at family as a God, or socialism as a God, or the Christian God as a God, or maybe even things like wealth, like people just
are obsessed with money.
Are obsessed with money, wealth as a God,
or power, or whatever.
Or power. Yeah. Do you think that inherently these could be differentiated as some being, I guess, better gods than others?
I think generally yes, but it's going to be it's like taking a distribution that's like a probability distribution and just looking at the mean. You lose a lot of information when you look at the mean. You lose the spread, you lose the, like, what if it's a bimodal distribution and there's two humps in the probability distribution and you just take the mean and it's nonsense?
Yeah.
You're losing a lot. So I think you could say, okay, drugs are generally bad, right? But drugs in low doses for some people might be okay, right? Like, you could say hard work is generally good, but for a highly anxious, highly stressed person, maybe they need to lay off work a little bit. If you're very type A and you're like a med student and you're working so hard and it's making you miserable and you're on these pills because you're depressed and you have to take this beta blocker because your blood pressure is too high when you take a test, maybe you need to cool off and worry less about work because you're going to be successful. Look at how far you've gotten. Like, it's not one size fits all. It's like personalized medicine versus giving everybody fucking whatever, penicillin.
Personalized religion.
Yeah, exactly. Or just personalized purpose. I think it's difficult to say some of them are better than others.
Would you okay, if we look at individual examples though.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, someone having his God as wealth. Or power, spending their whole life trying to acquire power, versus someone whose God, let's say, is the collective, is socialism.
Okay.
Spending his whole life trying to make his society progress as much as possible.
Right.
Would you say that they're both inherently similar in value? Or I guess let's say you only had the choice to have one of them as your God.
Yeah.
Would you rather have wealth as your God or the collective as your God?
It's almost like capitalism versus communism. Capitalism.
Oh yeah, that's true. Yeah. I guess I didn't portray the question in a good way though, because I guess from an individualistic perspective, if you spend your whole life trying to get wealth, you'll be more wealthy, more successful versus. Right. So that goes back to what our actual values are.
Yeah.
That if you believe that helping others is a really good thing, and that taking all the money to yourself is not a really good thing.
Right. I think religion's a really good way to package these values together. Like you said, the New Testament is an excellent way to combine all the teachings of Jesus into like a book that you could read and say, live by this. And that's impressive that religion does that. And I think it speaks to people who are good at literature, who are good at the storytelling. Talking to you now, I kind of feel like you're that way. If you think about the examples you've talked about recently versus me, you talking about this like example of the Russian guy who was almost executed, but he didn't get executed. Whereas I just like bring up facts and arguments. Our ways of communicating are very different. So I think for some people, religion communicates these truths, whereas to me, I don't see the truth as much in religion, but I see the truth in other things.
You see, in what things do you see truth?
I don't want to be like circle jerky, dick in hand. Oh, logic, reason, science. For me, like there is some feeling to it. A lot of it is just like, do the things that you enjoy, do everything in moderation, don't take anything too seriously. Like maybe there are these like small principles that I live by that kind of make me who I am.
Are these truths though?
Okay, so what is the truth?
What is truth? That's the same question that Pontius Pilate asks Jesus. Because I think Jesus tells him, I am the truth and the way and the life, or something like that. And then Pontius Pilate just looks at him and just says, what is truth?
Wow.
It's one of the
like
most...
those words?
Those exact words. Yeah.
Okay.
What is truth?
Isn't it arrogant as fuck to come down and say, I am the truth, the way?
Not if you are the truth and the way.
Yeah, agreed. But like, why was Jesus saying that? Because I always felt like what's his point? What is he doing? It's like abstract. The words he uses, like if you actually look at the Bible passages for this in the Gospels, the words he uses are like very broad, like saying "I am the way, I am the truth." How do you respond to that? What is he getting at? Like it almost sounds like nonsense. It sounds like the people in New York City on the street who are yelling, "I'm the second coming," whatever. You know, it's like everybody else is going about their day in this like nice Roman society, and they're like, "Wait a minute, what the hell's going on?"
I think it's when you think about whom he was talking to in terms of his society, it was Jews, right?
Yeah.
Who were expecting a Messiah, who were expecting someone to bring them this more fulfilling truth.
Right.
And so, yeah, you know, if you go up to an atheist who thinks that there is no absolute truth, there's nothing, and you tell him I'm the truth, and
it's not well received.
And the way it's just going to be like, what the heck are you talking about? But in terms of the society where Jesus was talking, and I think to any person who believes in the existence of some solid truth that is unchanging, that has been the same throughout all of time, and he says to him, I am the truth, I am the way, then this person might be like, okay, so, you know, what do you mean by that? And why are you the truth? What do you teach that's different from what I know?
Yeah, they'll be like, what are you talking about? So I don't know if you know this, what was the majority religion in Rome at the time?
Classical paganism.
Oh, it was, okay.
Yeah.
What percentage were Jews?
In all of the Roman Empire, I'm not sure. But I mean, Jesus came specifically to, you know, like to Jerusalem and that area. Right. Where it was like easily 85-90% Jewish. Okay. Yeah. Because they'd only been recently conquered by Rome.
But when he's saying this to the high court, to Pontius Pilate or whatever, isn't that kind of blind? Isn't that kind of like know your audience? Like, not to criticize Jesus, but like he's saying these like abstract words. He's speaking in the language of Jews to non-Jewish people. I don't know. That's one of the passages that kind of rubs me the wrong way. It's like,
but I feel like, you know, even if you read Plato and any of the ancient Greek philosophers, they had this concept of truth.
Okay.
Of knowledge with a capital K, of wisdom. So I think, this separation would only happen between, I guess, a nihilist and a non-nihilist. Okay. And it seemed like the culture of the time was non-nihilistic. Versus if you go to Nietzsche and tell him I am truth, then, you know, he's just going to go crazy on you.
Right. And if you go today and say it, then it's just like, are we nihilists today then?
Definitely to a greater extent than, and especially in, you know, the circles that you and I are in. Yeah. But as a whole world, definitely not in the Middle East, not in most of Africa.
Okay. Maybe I'm just thinking of the people in the streets of New York that are proclaiming to be the second coming of Christ. Yeah. Because we're also waiting for the Messiah, you could say, the second coming. Why don't we take those people seriously when we hear them today?
The ones who claim to be Jesus Christ?
Yeah, who might have delusions, who might be schizophrenic, who might have a mental illness and not have their medication. Like, from the scientific medical perspective, that's what's going on. But if you're not a nihilist, then why don't we take those people seriously? You know? Like, it's not... Yeah.
I guess you look at their teachings and you see if they align with what Jesus teaches.
Yeah, but we don't even look at their teachings. We just dismiss them as being crazy people, in quotes. It's weird. Yeah. It's like... Yeah, I don't know. It's weird because we have this... Like, the New Testament is great, but how much do we actually slow down and view everybody?
Well, when Jesus came, he rose the dead, he healed paralytics, he unblinded the blind.
He gave everything he had.
Yeah. What's interesting is most of his preaching was done in small circles. A lot of the miracles he did, he told the people not to reveal them to anyone else until after his resurrection. I think most of the people who believed in, I don't know if it's true, but I feel like most of the people who believed in Jesus would have done so after the resurrection, after he rose from the dead.
Yeah, agreed.
Whereas the person on the streets of New York, he, like at least most of the people I see are preaching more from anger. Right. From, like when you look at the person, you get unsettled. Right. And it would have been a very different situation, I feel, with
yeah.
Jesus. Yeah, and some of them do get taken seriously, like Joseph Smith and the Mormons.
Okay, yeah.
I just realized that Joseph Smith wrote the Book of Mormon when he was 24 years old.
Oh yeah, you were telling me that the other day.
Crazy, yeah.
And it worked, and he has millions of followers now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wild. Yeah, okay, so there's the person screaming in New York has a kind of an attention seeking, whereas Jesus was low key. That's an interesting difference. I never thought of it that way. Okay, so people say, oh, Jesus was a socialist. He multiplied the loaves and fishes and gave to everybody. But and he healed the sick, and he healed, he rose people from the dead. He did all this for his community. But you saying that he did these miracles in small circles made me think that maybe he was more of a libertarian. I don't know. He's helping people around him. He's helping the family unit, the community. Anyway, something we brought up earlier, nuclear war and how dropping the atomic bombs might have changed society. There was a tangent I wanted to go on that. Have you heard of the concept of the Great Filter?
No, what is it?
Generally, there's no other intelligent life that we know of in the universe. But our planet is not very rare for where it's located and for the conditions for life to be created. We're in the Goldilocks zone in terms of distance from our sun. That's not super unique to planets. And we would think that if we're not super unique, then why don't we see a bunch of other intelligent life around us in the universe? One of the proposed answers to that is that life does exist, but it eventually goes through some great filter that prevents life from becoming so huge that it's a spacefaring civilization that can go across the galaxy. Am I making sense? So when we
are we experiencing that great filter?
We don't know what the great filter is, but all we do know is that we don't see any other intelligent life in our galaxy. We are not seeing any signals of intelligent life from our galaxy. So it's possible that in our arrow of time going into the future, we are either before the great filter or after. Some people say that the great filter might have been the primordial soup that creates cells to begin with, that creates the first bacterial cell. That could have been a filter, and we made it past that filter, and therefore we are one of the only unique intelligent life civilizations. Whereas all the other countries all the other planets in the Goldilocks zone might have all the amino acids sloshing around in a saltwater solution that hasn't yet gone past that filter. And obviously there's way more civilizations and races and species behind the filter than in front of it. Yeah. Some people say that the filter might be the, what do they call it? The endosymbiotic theory, where you had two prokaryotic... Yeah, exactly. Yeah. One prokaryotic cell eats another prokaryotic cell, and the organelles inside the larger one are then old bacteria.
So you might have a lot of life elsewhere, but it's bacterial
life,
so we can't see it with...
So it's not intelligent, and they don't emit electromagnetic radiation that we can detect. The interesting theory that relates to what we were saying earlier, sorry, it took me a while to get there, is that the great filter is some weapon that destroys us.
Oh.
And it's possible that the atomic bomb is that great filter. And we haven't yet made it to the filter because we haven't yet killed ourselves with atomic bombs.
Yeah, and it could be something that's even going to come after the atomic bombs. That was from 70, 80 years ago. And you could imagine something... I guess the H-bomb that the Soviets developed in 1953 was 1,000 times stronger than the one that was dropped on Hiroshima.
Could be something like that.
So it could be something that's even 10,000 times more strong than that one.
Yeah, but it could also be something completely different. We're talking about positive feedback of nuclear reaction. What if it's something we haven't even discovered yet? What if it's antimatter reaction? Have you read science fiction books like Dan Brown or whatever? Where antimatter bullshit.
Yeah.
And it makes things explode. And it's when matter reacts with antimatter, you just get a huge release of energy. It could be something like that.
Here's an interesting thing though, from a social perspective. What if it's something like social media?
Or global warming.
But you would feel... I don't know if that would be a barrier because... You could develop technology to go to Mars and colonize, and by the time that Mars gets messed up, you could go to somewhere else.
Yeah, but you could say that. What if the filter is destroying the planet that you start on? burning so many fossil fuels that the carbon dioxide levels get so high that it gets so hot on the planet that we start on.
Yeah, but I feel like the filter would, in our case, would probably be something like maybe video games or just these pleasureful byproducts of this consumerism society.
Yeah.
Which constantly appeal more, like, every chips tastes better than how it did a year or 2 years ago.
Yeah, it could be high fructose corn syrup.
High fructose, it could be something as simple as that.
Yeah, that's like Brave New World. You get your soma or whatever, your pleasure-seeking drug. Counterpoint, cigarettes. Cigarettes had a huge spike in popularity. They became, and now in the US it's only like 10-15% of people smoke. Maybe 20%. But like at one point, almost everybody smoked. You had 70% people smoking. All these social movements and health movements, and the medical community was against it, and the government eventually was against it, and now we smoke less in the US. Right.
Yeah. And at its peak, do you think it killed something like 5% of people from cancers?
No way it's that much. You think it's that much? Well,
you don't think it's that much?
I don't know.
I mean, it could have been something like you get the cancer in your 70s.
Right, yeah.
Whereas otherwise you might have lived to 80, 85.
Right.
That's...
Our filter needs to stop the species from reproducing. You know what I mean? Like, okay, video game addiction is a problem, gambling addiction is a problem, but those... Do they stop people from having sex? Do they stop people from raising babies? Maybe.
Didn't they have the feelies in Brave New World?
Yeah.
Something like that would...
Yeah. But that's more like... Isn't that more like dystopian? Like, I don't know. That was more like government imposed. Maybe not. I don't know. The obvious ones to me seem like a bomb or a weapon that kills us all. Or running out of energy.
What about the Chinese policy of restricting families to one child?
But that's self-induced. Like, you would think that, okay, if we notice that the population's severely declining and we're at like less than 1 billion now, we can
that's true.
That should be easily reversible.
What about Swedish population decrease, which I think they're given a lot of incentive to reproduce, but you still notice a decline.
Same with South Korea. The birth rate is like 1 child per family now. Yeah,
so it could be that, I guess, as a society gets more developed, the great filter is just...
I don't know. That's like, how they say, if you look at the population curve, there's this huge exponential curve, and then it starts to level off. And I think Bill Gates and some other people predict that we're going to level off around 12 million.
Billion?
Sorry, 12 billion, yeah. Yep. So like the population of the world in like 100 years is going to be 12 billion, and we'll kind of plateau around there, which is well within the capacity of the Earth, right? Like clearly we've invaded the rest of the planet, but the Earth should be able to sustain 12 billion people. And the only countries now that are having a lot of kids are like the poorest countries, obviously. So a lot of Africa is having kids, some South America, some Latin America. So I don't know if that's so much going to be something that drives our population to zero as much as it's just going to equalize where we are. But I think
you're right. The great filter has to be something
that kills
immediately.
Yeah, maybe not super fast. It could be something like running out of energy.
Or like global warming, you were saying.
Right.
Yeah.
It needs to halt our technological progress. Because what essentially a filter is something that prevents us from becoming a spacefaring civilization to contact other life in the universe. Because the original question was, why don't we see intelligent life all around us? Why aren't people traveling around the universe now? If the conditions for life are so easily attainable. If the planet Earth is not unique in the universe.
How old is the universe? Like, I know Earth is 4 billion. What's the universe, like 12? 13 billion?
13.2 or something like that, 13.6 maybe.
Yeah, and it took Earth like pretty much 4.2 billion years or something to form humans.
Yeah. But, I mean, billions of planets. Or, sorry, billions of stars that have, so many planets. Yeah, it's interesting. But, like real people have done the numbers. I think it's called the Fermi paradox. Why haven't we seen so much other life? It's interesting.
Yeah. Or it could be that,
we're unique.
We're unique. And, that might be another argument for theism.
Sure. But my problem with that being an argument for theism, and I think Neil deGrasse Tyson says this well, that if your evidence for religion is scientific mystery, then your religion becomes an ever receding pocket of
yeah. Oh, I fully agree with that.
So that shouldn't be that can't stand alone.
Yep.
But yeah, it's you could think, yeah, maybe we are unique and maybe it's special.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I've always I have no problem being called a human chauvinist.
It's fine.
And there are all these pictures of Earth taken from far away in the solar system by the, I guess, satellites that we've sent.
Or from the moon or whatever, yeah.
Yeah, that show it being so small, just like a dot in the
blue
picture.
Marble, right?
The blue...
marble.
Is it marble?
That's or when they were on the moon and they saw the Earth from the moon.
Yeah, I think that one's blue marble. But then there was another one taken by the Voyager shuttle where just before we lost communication with it when it was leaving the solar system.
Like the last one.
Or the blue dot. Okay,
one
was the other one was called, yeah. And people are like, look at this, how tiny it is. All your problems are,
I know,
like so insignificant. But to me, it seems like the size of something and its significance are not really correlated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the easiest example is if you have a child, it's just like,
like 7 pounds.
7 pounds. And something happens to that child, your entire world gets shaken.
Your entire family's world gets shaken.
Yeah.
The lives of 50 people are affected by one small thing happening to one small child.
One 7 pound thing affecting like 5,000 pounds of...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just something that came to my mind about...
That's interesting.
The significance of humans. And
I think there is something, like, it's like when you are stressed about something and you go up and you look at the sky, there's something refreshing. I tend to be nihilist, so I kind of see the perspective where, like, if you're worried about something and you kind of look at it in the grand scheme of things, so it's not only how small we are in space, right? Blue marble, blue dot, or whatever. It's also how small we are in time. Like, my life of 70, 80 years is like such a tiny life within human history that goes back, 20,000 years, and it's so insignificant to the world. Right? Like, at most, what do? I have a decent career in medicine. I might make some research, scientific contributions, and that's it. But, like, my small problem in my day-to-day life as I'm doing my research or as I'm training in medical school, that's pretty... Temporally, that's pretty tiny. Spatially, even more tiny.
Yeah, you said in the grand scheme of things. I guess if you look at the whole history of humanity, but, you are you. And so for you, it's not the grand scheme of things. It's the Alexian scheme of things.
Yeah, agreed.
And I guess you could use both ways. When something good happens, you could savor it in your scheme of things. When something bad happens, you could use the notion of it being relatively meaningless in the grand scheme of things to help you cope with it. I'm not opposed to that.
No, I like it. That's a good mindfulness technique. It's like kind of bend your perspective to whatever makes you happier. Another thing I'll say is that I've learned, somebody mentioned this during my psych rotation. I also learned by just like talking to friends and other people with problems that's not a good argument to give someone that's worried about something. If you're very stressed about a test you have to take, or if you have a death in the family, it would be very, very poor form for me to say, that's tiny.
Don't worry about it.
Exactly. It's dismissive. It's like...
It's insignificant.
Right, exactly. But it's almost invalidating to say that to somebody else who's anxious or worried about something. It's similar to like saying... my mom used to do this sometimes. It'd be like, I would have some small problem or I'd do bad on a test or something like that. And the comforting thought would be, there are thousands of children dying in Syria. And you're sitting here obsessed about something. And sorry, for
like
me,
your PlayStation gets broken.
Yeah, exactly. Or I wasted like $50 on a PlayStation game that I didn't like, and I should have bought a different $50 PlayStation game. For me, that kind of works. It helps to put things in perspective like that. It's like, these people, like, their parents are dead, right? There are orphan children everywhere. And I'm complaining about this like very first world problem, very stupid problem, and we're not even poor, right? Like, I can save up and buy another PlayStation game. But to say that to somebody else is a little risky.
Yeah.
But I think it helps to have some perspective. I like it. It's good for me. It works for me.
Yeah, I think if for the reflecting person, it will be good. for the less reflecting people, it might be alienating, or like if as a doctor you tell someone, you show them a picture of some African kid whose parents and everyone died when like that person's 90-year-old mother had died. When you show them that African kid, that person might just show you off and not even think about anything that you said.
Yeah.
But I guess if it's someone who's thought a lot about these issues and their place in the history of the world, then that might work more.
Maybe that's the difference between, for people it's okay to, for people who that's helpful for and that's not.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting how like these tiny small things end up affecting us so much. Like how the brain works and how we perceive these issues and how we...
Mm-hmm.
How in our society we can be so worried about something so small. It reminds me of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where like, okay, our base need is like shelter, water, food. And then we have like maybe career aspirations further up, and then self-actualization and hobbies and interests. And it's like, in the first world, obviously, our primary concerns are very much at the top of the pyramid of the hierarchy of needs. Whereas in poor countries, impoverished societies, they are worrying about food, shelter, water, which like I've never worried about food, shelter, water.
Yeah. And to a point, we kind of spoke about this briefly last time when we were talking about how we feel like life is more rich in third world countries versus in the first world.
Maybe that's why.
That could be why, because I don't know if, to me it seems self-evident, but I don't know if it is, but the process of going through self-actualization requires much more of an effort than the process of
eating
like
food.
Going out and getting food, and hunting animals and eating. And the fact that it is much more difficult and that we have all these bases covered for us could be one of the reasons why we have such high rates of depression in the first world countries versus in third world.
Right.
Where we have more suicides, why there is just less contentness with life.
Yeah. Agreed. Oh, the suicides example is good. So whenever I bring that up to people, what you just said, maybe there's higher rates of depression, anxiety in the first world or in the US because we're more advanced. They always say, not necessarily true. Maybe it's just because we're better at diagnosing it. It's like autism rates maybe not have increased over the past 30 years with vaccines, but more likely we're getting better at recognizing autism and treating these kids earlier or helping parents that have autistic children earlier. I don't think autism rates have increased. I don't think depression has increased in the West. I think it's just we screen for it more. It could be like a medicalization issue too. It could be we overdiagnose depression and anxiety, maybe, but it could also just be that we're better at recognizing it. So,
I think this this is obviously an N of one, but from my time in the Middle East, I didn't sense this incontentness with life that I sense with people here in America.
Agreed. No, I completely agree with that. And that's something that I've noticed too. When I went to the Middle East, people are happier. And it could be related to the fact that they're worried about their balcony being bombed off, right? My parents would tell me stories about this all the time when they grew up during the war in the Middle East. Half the time their balcony would be blown off. They would have a friend that would get hit by a sniper or stuff like this. So you're almost more grateful for your life day to day than we are in the U.S.
Yeah.
But an interesting objective measure to kind of test whether or not this difference between the U.S. and the Middle East the difference in anxiety, depression rates is due to us diagnosing it more, would be to look at the suicide rates like you've seen. Is suicide more prevalent in the U.S. or in the Middle East?
I would think in the U.S. Is that true? Do you know?
I don't know. I think in the U.S. too, though.
Yeah, there are other influencing factors like
access to guns and stuff like that.
That and also religion.
True.
I guess for a secular, like the average secular U.S. person, suicide isn't necessarily. It would just end everything prior, but for the average Middle Eastern person, suicide would make you much more likely to go to hell. So there's like an afterwards consideration as well.
Agreed. Eternal damnation versus just end of your life.
Yeah, So I guess if there would have been like some sort of religious advanced society that could be compared to the religious primitive society of the Middle East or Africa.
Wait, you think the U.S. is that much more religious than the Middle East? Sorry, that much less religious?
Oh yeah.
I thought the percentage of Christians in the U.S. was like, the percentage of religious people in the U.S. was like 70.
It could be 70, but if you look at it two-dimensionally with percent who just believe versus on the y-axis like rigor of belief or like how much that influences you day to day, it's much more of an influencing factor in the Middle East.
Okay. So you're saying there's much more religious practice in the Middle East?
Yeah, they take it much more seriously than like the U.S. takes religion on average.
Yeah, it makes sense. Like the Southern Baptists and Protestants we have around here go to church maybe once a week.
Yeah, if that, once a week, and then they go and Christmas, fornicate Easter. And
yeah.
The Muslim is less likely to do that.
We don't fornicate; we have sex. Yeah, okay, that's a good point. That's interesting because when I went, my family isn't particularly religious. Mm-hmm. So when I was there, it's almost like being in the U.S. for me. But it's like a very progressive pocket in, where my parents are from. Mm-hmm. So, it definitely depends. But I guess on average, they're probably a lot more religious there.
But yeah, I definitely think that the underlying factor is just having to worry about all these things down the pyramid that makes people not feel this emptiness of needing to climb to the top of the pyramid that we sense in the first world.
I also think that the needs that are at the bottom of the pyramid are much like more objective. It's like, do I have enough food? Do I have enough water? Do I have shelter? As opposed to, am I happy with my career? Am I happy with my life? Do I enjoy living in New York City? Do I enjoy... like the self-actualization things are a lot more nuanced than satisfied for nourishment.
And, I think even in the first world, we might, at least I feel it to some extent, where when I run out of food in the fridge, I know what I have to do. I know I have to go to the grocery and I do it. And it takes off from this pressure of, having to read scientific papers and reading like Dostoevsky, Plato. I don't have to do all that. I just need to go and buy this food from this place. Yeah. But then I come back, I put the food in the fridge, and then the question comes up, what do I do now? Right. There are so many options. Yeah. Do I just go and watch TV or do I do these things which will help me get to the top of the pyramid? And
do I work on my research? And then if I do work on my research, it's not as satisfying as this like errand that I just ran.
Yeah.
I agree. I think, it's like it's almost like the satisfaction you get from cleaning, right? It's like, this is my shelter, this is my home. If I clean the floors and make my bed look nice and do the laundry and do the dishes, then I feel good about myself because it's like...
You feel good about how you spent the time. Mm-hmm. You don't feel like you've wasted the past
because it's something you need to do. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I also think there's an element of satisfaction in like checking boxes. Mm-hmm. Whether or not you have a to-do list, if you're like, figuratively checking boxes, it feels good to get things done. To know I have to do 4 things today, and it's like at 2 different places, and I'm going back and forth, and I'm doing them. And then at the end of the day, you could say, yes, I finished this. So this is one of my problems with research that I've been doing now. I feel like a lot of the tasks that I'm completing aren't like yes or no answers, aren't like, yes, it's done. I bought food for the week from the grocery store. Mm-hmm. It's more like, I think I got this result, and I'm not sure if it's good enough, and I'm not sure if I have to repeat it, and I'm not sure if it fits into the grand scheme of my thesis. Mm-hmm. It's less clear. It's more subjective in terms of research. Until you have like a cohesive story together that works into a paper, I find it's less gratifying. That's why I think I like writing and presenting papers more, because it's like you already have the story, you already have the results. Putting it on paper, practicing your talk is a lot nicer.
Yeah. I mean, I'm obviously, I guess for the listeners, you're ahead of me in
our research,
in the research. And so for me, I'm just starting. I've been here a couple of months. So for me, I've gotten the checklist, and mainly because it's a new lab, it's just getting these new protocols to work. Yeah. But I'm sure it'll be the same thing once we actually have to present new data.
Yeah, eventually.
Yeah. Like for now, it's just, we've never done long-range PCR before. Right. We have to go and figure out how to do it. And that's something that's easily quantifiable. Like, you get some sort of DNA from a known sample where you know what you should be looking for in the gel. You either see it or you don't, and you just keep doing it again until you see what you need to see.
Yeah. But even that is like more subjective than like medicine. Right? Think about like a medical rotation. Like, yes, I know I healed this person. I had an emergency room shift and we did CPR and we got his heart rate going again and then we stabilized him and he's better now. He was almost dead before, he's better. You can pinpoint the exact position where you helped save a life or you helped treat somebody's diabetes or you diagnosed a new illness or you fixed someone's Bell's palsy by giving them steroids.
Yeah.
You can like very clearly look at the improvement you're making in life. Whereas in research, it's almost like maybe this paper will one day lead to a clinical trial that will one day lead to a treatment.
Yeah, that's something that I mean, even already I've been worrying about in terms of research is that like when do you know that you've done enough?
Never.
I guess you never feel like you've done enough.
At the basic science level, you never know that you've done enough. Yeah. You could say, oh, I'm going to be a drug entrepreneur and I'm going to take this drug into industry and sell it to this company and make sure they mass produce it. That's a $10 million process to get a drug into market.
Yeah.
And
we should just as an idea for the future.
Yeah.
We have a lot of people here who've been through that process. It might be helpful to
talk to
them
or to bring them up to talk to us
on the podcast.
Yeah, that could be good because it's huge and it's a long process but like I don't know, even that's like long-term that's like a 10-year process too. $10 million in 10 years.
And do you think they feel the gratification at that point, or do they still feel like that's not the end and they have to do more?
Probably it's not the end and they have to do more. But also I think in order to be the person who does that, you can't be seeking the instant gratification. Like a person who's good at research doesn't need to be able to pinpoint exactly where they made an improvement. And in terms of people who do research versus medicine, I think the people who should be doing medicine are the people who kind of want that rush that says, oh, I did this and I did better today. Whereas the people who are better at research might be able to keep their eye on the prize that might be like 5 years away. Like a big Nature paper that, eventually will be published.
And even within medicine, you could look at, differentiate that even further and look at surgery versus non-surgical fields.
Trauma surgery versus family medicine.
Yeah.
Right? Family medicine, it's like, this person started a lipid drug because they have high lipid count. And maybe this will prevent a heart attack in the future. And maybe it might prevent diabetes or metabolic syndrome in the future. Versus I pulled bullets out of this wound and stitched them up.
Yeah.
It's like, I very clearly saved a life at 4:30 today. It's like
versus I saved a heart attack that would have occurred 25 years from now.
Maybe. Yeah. No, it's completely different. Agreed. Where do you think you fall?
I mean, at least in terms of medicine on neurology, which is a very slow...
Yeah. Neurology is a very sad field too, I feel.
It is very sad. There's not much we can do.
There's no Alzheimer's treatment.
No. And for most neurodegenerative diseases, it's like giving it a diagnosis and maybe a drug that gives a person 6 more good months. And yeah, but in terms of research, I feel like I don't know yet.
Yeah.
I don't know yet. I think in about a year, if I'm depressed, then that means I need the instant gratification.
Yeah.
But if I'm not, then that means I guess I'm okay with just going through the grind and waiting.
Yeah. Honestly, that's how I felt in the beginning with the research.
Do you think you could tell within the first few months?
No, definitely not. I started realizing it about a year in, and I think I want something that is a little more instant gratification, which is weird because I always thought of myself as like this, okay, long-term, keep eye on the prize. But also I've been able to continue doing the long-term gratification research by supplementing with hobbies that are more instant gratification. Like, okay, exercise obviously makes me feel amazing afterwards, so that's huge. If I run, if I play sports, that's great. But also, like, this is kind of stupid, but like I find that video games have like a goal, a quest, and when you complete that quest, maybe it's like a rush of dopamine or something, but it feels good. When you see your character level up from 5 to 6, it's like, oh, I'm making progress. Maybe my research is shit, maybe my project isn't working, maybe this result was a complete waste of 40 hours, but I got to level 6. And there's something that feels good about it. Or I completed this quest and I saved the dragon, whatever, like whatever nonsense you want.
And you feel like that helps you continue doing your research?
Yeah, because it's like, I feel like I'm making progress in some element of my life. I weightlift, so I feel like I'm able to do like a bicep curl with more than I used to be able to do, or do a bench press with more weight than I used to. So there's like improvements in that regard.
Yeah.
You know, like even if your research isn't, because research does improve. I don't want to say that research is stagnant, but it's like 2 steps forward, or 1 step forward, 2 steps forward, 1 step back.
Yeah.
And during the times of that 1 step back, it's nice to have myself still moving forward in my sports, in my video games. If I'm playing piano, I can improve on whatever I know there.
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. Because I've felt that as well. At least in the past 3 months, I started playing tennis more regularly.
Yeah.
And it does feel good to like hit better forehands, hit faster serves more consistently. And you notice. And it is something that I look forward to every week. Yeah. And you do notice, yeah. Yeah, it's so cool. I guess it's like you're teaching yourself. You're teaching yourself in the short term things that you hope you'll internalize and apply to the long term.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I need to like keep myself improving in some domains. And in medicine, it was very clear. I'm learning all these subjects. I'm getting better at whatever, preparing for step 1 or whatever exam I need to prepare at. And I'm learning more things.
That's something we should discuss at some point. The process of step 1 preparation and like going through your world and seeing your... Yeah.
And the different strategies and stuff like that.
But I feel like that would need much more time than however much we have left.
Should we call it? Are we out of time?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've been talking for about like an hour and a half.
I think it was a very productive discussion.
Yeah, it was great.
I enjoyed it so much.
We kind of went everywhere. We hit religion, we hit some history.
Yeah, and it feels like this is probably the format that we would want to stick to.
Agreed,
It's been working pretty well.
I feel pretty good about not... I mean, like, I still have topics in mind that I can bring up, and I feel like I can bring those up whenever, but I feel pretty good about, like, kind of letting it naturally flow.
Yeah, I agree. At most, I would say 1 topic to start us off, from which we will branch into hundreds of directions.
But even today, what did we start on today?
We started on religion, didn't we? Or
we're gonna have to listen back because we started on bubbly water. We started on your lemonade.
That's true.
And then where did we go from there? All right, we'll listen to it. Should we stop the recording?